Welcome to the FML Podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shameer Sachdev, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML Podcast. Today we're joined by Michael Treacy, Head of Marketing at OpenPayd. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Do you want to sort of introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've ended up at OpenPayd?
So Michael Treacy. I am the Head of Marketing here at OpenPayd. Been working within the fintech space for a good 8 years now. So straight out of university, I went and worked for a bank, and that was a little bit old school for me, and kind of fell into fintech really due to an introduction to a founder of a very early stage startup back in 2014. And ever since then, I've worked for multiple different businesses, everything from very small early stage to large corporate financial technology businesses. Most recently, I'm now the head of marketing at OpenPayd. So looking after everything from brand, customer acquisition. I've been here now since December 2020, and yeah.
Do you want to take us through, or tell us a little bit more about OpenPayd, what they do, and who they're targeting, who they're speaking to?
OpenPayd is a global payments and banking as a service platform. What we do at OpenPayd is we provide the underlying infrastructure that brands need to launch their own embedded finance propositions. Putting it simply, we provide access to local payment rails such as SEPA Instant and faster payments. We do card acquiring, we do accounts with virtual IBANs, FX and payouts. So it's basically the full embedded finance stack you can access really easily through a single API. And in terms of our client base, banking as a service and embedded finance is accessible really to any business with a digital delivery channel. However, the early adopters of services like OpenPayd tend to be other fintechs, so fintechs that are looking to build on top of the underlying infrastructure and build their own customer experiences on top, from fintechs to other financial institutions such as lenders, remittance companies, etc. And then in the more recent times, you see a lot of the kind of larger crypto exchanges that perhaps need access to the fiat rails to enable their customers to top up or as they call it, on-ramp the fiat so that they can start trading on their platforms. And then outside of the kind of traditional finance, or not the traditional finance, but the financially focused brands, you've got marketplaces. You've got large retail e-commerce brands that are now moving towards embedded finance as an option to remove the payments and banking as a cost center for their business to a revenue generator. So quite a broad mix, but I would say the fintechs and the financial institutions are the kind of the majority of our client base right now.
Yeah, from my conversations with sort of many marketers within the fintech space, and particularly within the B2B space, I think there's a view that B2B marketing has changed quite significantly over the last few years. It'd be really great to sort of understand or hear from you how you feel B2B marketing has changed and how then you've kind of incorporated that into OpenPayd's marketing strategy and then eventually growth strategy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the way that I look at B2B marketing and I can go into the way I think it has changed over the last few years is this kind of, you need to build your brand, but then you also need to support the sales and drive those leads. And in the past, these have been kind of almost two separate departments, whereas you're starting to see a lot of this kind of merge now where you look at concepts like account-based marketing, where you need to provide the content and build the brand presence so that you can then try and commercialize that at a later date through demand generation programs. I really believe that people are starting to understand that they are marketing to a human rather than they're marketing to a business. And that messaging and that activity has to be tailored towards that as well. And I think we've moved probably in the last couple of years where everything kind of went digital. So the amount of webinars that people were pushing out there and attending, and that was a kind of shift to, we can't do events anymore, so we have to go online, we have to do these events online. More recently, the events have started back up again, definitely since the start of this year. And I've seen a massive change during those events. There's high-level people in attendance. The content isn't improved dramatically. There really is a commercial focus from these events as well. So it's not just a branding activity. It really is, people are there to buy. People are there to really check out what's in the market, and that's been fantastic to see, really.
Do you think events are making a comeback, but in a good way in that case? Then?
I'm a strong believer that they are. We've done, I think over the last 4 weeks, we've done 5 different events here at OpenPayd all over the world, everywhere from the US to Europe to the UK. It's been the same at every single one. The caliber of decision makers that are in attendance has been fantastic, perhaps because they haven't been traveling a lot over the past couple of years, and they're looking to get out there to meet prospects on their side, as well as to meet partners and perhaps network with the wider community. So from what I've seen to the start of 2022 this year, I really do feel strongly that events are, like you say, making a small comeback.
Perhaps an observation and a question. Do you think that one of the reasons why we're getting high quality in attendance and senior decision makers coming to events is a combination of improved quality of content, as you mentioned, but also because perhaps the events are slightly more smaller and niche now? They're a lot more focused. There's a lot less, or at least from what I've seen, there's a lot less, 4,000 people in a room trying to sell each other stuff. And now it feels like there's a lot more intimate events where you're getting a lot more out of it.
I'm speaking very broadly there. Yes, you have still got to be selective about the events that you choose to attend. And it is on this basis of you get a lot more value out of a room of 600 people or an event of 600 people where you know who the speakers are, you know what the content topics are, you know who you're planning to meet when you're there, rather than going to for example, a web summit when there's 35,000 people there and you are perhaps struggling to know how to connect with the relevant people whilst you're on the ground there, or there's such a broad array of topics, you really don't know which ones to attend, etc., etc. But if you go and you are at a fintech event which is specifically looking at embedded finance, or a fintech event that is specifically looking into APIs within the industry, you really know that you've got that concentrated audience that for a company like OpenPayd is really looking towards.
What's your view in terms of the sort of more traditional sort of ABM tactics? Do you think they're still relevant, or have you moved away from them, or what's your kind of stance at the moment?
An example of that, if you have a white paper which sits behind a wall, which you have to give your login, you have to give your data to gain access, you've got to think of what's the reason the person is downloading that white paper. Is it because they want to contact your business, or is it because they want the information in the white paper? To hit them with a sales email directly after that is, I think, wrong timing and out of context. It's about being smart. Who are the people you're trying to connect with? Who's the decision maker? Who are the influencers of that decision as well? And try and build a program around adding value without expectation back until they're ready to have that conversation. For me, we work in a B2B space where the sales cycle is quite long, and integration with a banking as a service provider is no small decision, and it has a lot of levels of sign-off. But what we want to be is front of mind when those decisions are ready to be made. So rather than being too aggressive on perhaps an outbound email campaign, or too aggressive on the sales team trying to call and get in front of them, make sure that everything that we do means when they're ready to make that decision, OpenPayd is the first brand that comes to mind. And that's across the different things. That's events that we speak at. Can we get our senior spokespeople at as many events as possible talking about the right topics? From our SEO perspective, if they're starting to research into banking as a service, are we number one on Google when they search for that? So it's considering those people, trying to get inside their minds in terms of when they are ready to look for a solution, how can we be ready to be at the front of that queue and actually start that conversation? And that's working very well for us at the minute. And I think a lot of the talk around embedded finance is helping our business, because when they do start to research that, we've been working on our content around this for 12 to 18 months now. And we've really got a head start, and it's helped our inbound lead process on that sense. When we're pushing out all of the content, now people are talking about embedded finance. People are downloading our reports, downloading our research because they're looking to find more information. The brand is there. We're front of mind. When they're ready for that conversation, they will come to us. So all of those things that we've been doing, not too aggressive on the demand generation, is now paying off in the long run.
It kind of invites a question about attribution and ROI. How do you reconcile that? I think the other question is, there's probably a lot of B2B marketers out there that are being asked that question by senior stakeholders. How do you also get buy-in from senior stakeholders as well? So a bit of a two-part question there.
So I think on the how do you do the attribution, this is something that we're looking at quite closely at the minute. I joined in December 2020. We spent the first 3 months really working on the foundations of our marketing growth engine, making sure that wherever we can track, we will track, implementing UTM for all of our digital links to make sure that at least any of the leads that come inbound, we can trace back to a piece of content. Having a look at our CRM system, are we recording the right fields with leads? Can we get the sales team to support in terms of asking those questions? Or how did you hear about us? How did you find out about us? Because a brand is only going to come, they're not really going to reach out unless they're really desperate for a provider and they can't find one. They're not really going to reach out until they've read a bit more about you. There's a bit of trust that has been built. There's maybe media articles online that they've seen. There's been an interview with your CEO on YouTube, for example, and all of those factors will lead them to make that first step to reach out. Now, I'm not saying that I can track whether they've watched us on a YouTube video and that has built a level of trust that they reach a point to reach out, or they include us on an RFP when they're reaching out to different providers. But we just make sure that everything that is digital, that we try and put a UTM link behind it so that we can track that if it comes through as a lead on the website. We do work with sales on a regular basis to try and understand what made our customer choose us over a competitor. And that's what we're doing at the minute to try and justify all of this work and all this effort and all this time and resources that we're putting into our content program.
It's a question that I think continuously comes up. And I suppose the second part to that question in terms of sort of stakeholder buy-in, did you face any friction there or did you, or was it kind of, was your approach sort of welcome with open arms or is it sometimes still a bit of a tenuous discussion to have?
On that front, I mean, we had to build the trust with the senior management that we know what we're doing, and that's why we started relatively small. A lot of the content side of the business that we were doing, we invested early on, but only in relatively small amounts in terms of budget. We invested a lot of time into it. Everything that we do on that front is pretty much done in-house. Basically, we started to reap the rewards when we, for example, were being told by third parties, whether that is people within the investment community, people within our peers within the space, people were giving the feedback on the business to say that, hey, where have you guys come from? Like, you guys have just all of a sudden burst onto the scene. You seem to be super busy on LinkedIn. Like, you guys are doing so much. And that was not necessarily as spending a lot of money on advertising. That was people recognizing that we were doing the hard work and the graft on attending conferences, speaking at conferences, doing interviews wherever we can, trying to provide comments on industry news when journalists are reaching out and asking for spokespeople to pass a comment on certain things that are happening in the industry. So everything combined, we started, wasn't as measurable as perhaps you would want it, but that third party feedback that we were getting started to kind of make its way through to the senior management, and they knew that we were on the right track. Then it also became easier to convert leads when we were getting them, because like I said, the trust was there. We were getting customer referrals or customer testimonials that really started to help speed things along and basically win deals when we're up against competitors, etc. So it took a long time. It didn't happen overnight, and this is why I always say you have to invest in your content strategy and your brand strategy very, very early on, because it's not something that you can just switch on, or it's not something that you can chuck a lot of budget at and it happens in a 4-week period. It's really, if you're going to build that trust and you're going to build that authenticity in the work that you're doing, you have to be doing it over a long period of time.
We're obviously B2B as well, and I absolutely agree with you. I think like there's things that we've started implementing, we don't expect to see like a return on it for 12 months.
Which is a hard sell into a CFO, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate that I'm kind of like the final decision maker, but it's. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. Like if I had to sell that to, if I was, in house, I was marketing director or CMO. Like, yeah, it'd be impossible to sell in, why we're doing a bunch of, I don't know, show reels or vignettes or whatever it is, and then putting them on LinkedIn, and then we're not going to see payback on it till January 2024, maybe even, because you might start the conversation next year, but it might take 9 months before you close the sale. So and
what we see and the way that we're trying to do some attribution towards the work that we're doing on that side, which is backed by data, is we see our conversion rates increase on our website because we're investing time into tweaking the copy or working on the SEO. We're seeing the cost per lead coming from our AdWords campaigns significantly reduce in terms of the ones that we convert. So you see metrics changing on the demand generation side or the customer acquisition side, which we know is one of the main key reasons is because of the work we're doing on the brand side.
I think the biggest shift that we saw when we really started pushing out content quite hard was inquiries. They didn't stop coming via the website, but we started to see a significant, it's almost like the website inquiries kind of stay static, but the number of inquiries coming directly to me via LinkedIn started to increase. And then also to my team as well, where they were getting people sort of dropping in a message going, oh, I've just seen you sort of post this, that'd be great if we could just arrange a call. And then you saw, 1 or 2 happened, and all of a sudden you're like, actually that's now a steady stream of inquiries coming in, and you realize the value of it. I think LinkedIn gets a lot of criticism that it doesn't deserve, to be honest with you. I think it's a great channel. You talked about sort of like building out the framework and sort of starting off small. Now that obviously, you've kind of got that machine that, going, I suppose the next question is, how do you scale that? And I suppose if I sort of put that in conjunction with, obviously, you're launching across multiple territories, how do you scale your activity and then at the same time take into consideration that you want to enter new territories as well?
What we're looking at in the minute in terms of scaling, say, the content program is adding more resource into improving the quality of the content. So if we're doing video, rather than kind of doing something in-house, maybe we will pull on external providers who can significantly increase or improve the quality of the production. If we're looking at the stuff that we do at events, how do we incorporate video and additional pieces of content at events? So we're not just present at the event, but we can make a big splash online using the event that we're attending to facilitate that. When we talk about scaling across different territories, one of the big jobs for our team over the next 12 months will be localization in certain markets. In Europe, it's pretty tricky with the amount of languages that are spoken across a single region. So we will be looking at localizing to some of our key European markets. And again, we are starting to think now. We have a small team based out in the US, which is kind of just operational at the minute, but we'll be looking towards that market probably over the next 12 months. And every single market has its own nuances. It's all not the same. And there's the steep learning curve for us to understand how we're best entering those markets. The customers that we currently serve, like I said, they're all kind of digitally native businesses who are global by nature. Anyone can access their products and services online. Where we're restricted is there's regulation in different regions and different markets that we need to consider, which perhaps is why expansion is slower within financial institutions or fintech firms, because that's a consideration that we have to make. But our expansion is driven by our customers. Where are our customers now? Where are they going to be in 12 months? how can we support them on their journey rather than them having to go to multiple providers for a solution like accounts or payments, etc. So our roadmap for expansion, like I say, is driven by our customers, our existing customers, and obviously when we enter those regions, that's when we start to look on the ground and see who else we can support in terms of their growth within the financial services industry.
Obviously launching into sort of new territories and then supporting your customers about what their needs are going to be sort of over the next 12 months. I suppose that brings about the question of the relationship between product and marketing. And I think to kick off first and foremost, how do you kind of ensure that relationship is continuously aligned? And then how do you then sort of manage that roadmap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a timely question because we're actually just setting up our product marketing department within OpenPayd. And this department is going to sit pretty much 50-50 between product and marketing, but not necessarily purely in the marketing team. We, as marketers, should be the subject experts on our product because we're the ones that are creating the content. We're the ones that are trying to position everything through email copy, everything through the website, everything through sales materials, etc. And we need to lean on the knowledge of the product team to do that. We have a great relationship with the product team. We recently brought in a head of product strategy who's been supporting A, not just the team's knowledge, but B, giving us that vision of where we're going to be in 2, 3 to 5 years and how we need to support them as a team in getting there, working on everything from the go-to-market strategy all the way down to the API docs, which historically had been left just to the product team to do. But however, there's a huge opportunity for us, especially when we're looking to communicate with developers or the developer community. How can we improve that experience for developers when they are exploring our docs? How do we make them easy, accessible, really straightforward to read, etc.? So the relationship is twofold because, the product team need a lot of resource for marketing, everything from the design, etc. And the marketing team need that knowledge, both from the product side and from the customer side, because they are the closest people to the customer. They spend a lot of time with them on the integration. They spend a lot of time discussing where their roadmap is and how does OpenPayd fit into that roadmap. And we try and absorb as not much knowledge from them as possible so that we can make sure that our messaging is aligned, our marketing strategy in terms of which markets we're going into next is aligned. So it's definitely key to have that strong relationship. And one of the reasons that we are introducing the product marketing function is because we really want to strengthen that relationship.
That's fantastic, Michael. So seeing as we've been talking about sort of relationships with other departments, let's talk about the relationship between marketing and sales. And I think for a B2B organization, I mean, it's paramount, right? So I suppose my question is, historically, there's always been sort of a bit of a battle between sort of, sales and marketing. And I think that the organizations that perform really, really well are the ones that have managed to sort of bridge that gap. So I suppose, how have you sort of strengthened the relationships between your marketing team and the sales team? And, what advice would you give to sort of any sort of B2B fintech organizations who are kind of struggling with that?
Historically, sales teams have perhaps viewed marketing as the people that make the pretty PowerPoints, and that's about it. And they've and that may be the case in some organisations, but I think very, very much from the start here at OpenPayd, we spent a lot of time trying to build that relationship with sales, not only on a kind of personal level. So that if you have an issue or you know that if you need something from somebody, you can just go and speak to them and know that you've got their full support. But also trying to show them the value we are adding and will be able to add if we're close to communicating. For example, I can show them a report and say, I can give you this report on a weekly basis based on the performance or where we're at with all our sales, if your sales team is accurately updating Salesforce. And trying to basically show that the collaboration will be able to lead to better insights, which means we can make better decisions on optimizing ads or deciding which event that we're going to go to, or targeting a new vertical because we're seeing more and more inbound leads from a specific industry. So that flow of communication is super important. We have a weekly fixed meeting with the sales team, and the demand generation team to go through all of the leads that have come through. They tell us which ones were good, which ones were not so good, what they want to see more of. If there's a specific salesperson who isn't getting as many leads for a period of time, we can do a bespoke campaign for them, which means that we can give them a boost and make sure that they're always kept busy. And it really is that that open line of communication. I mean, we're all on the same team, right? We're all judged at the end of the year on the volume and the revenue that we're bringing into the business. And for us, I'd say 12 months ago, our inbound leads, they weren't great. They were kind of a few per week. Now we are basically having conversations on whether or not we need to turn down the marketing for a bit because they're getting overloaded, or we can switch it back on, which is a great position to be in. But this, for us, we're scaling both the marketing team, we're scaling the sales team. We're really in that growth mode at the minute. The fact that the sales team and the marketing team are working so seamlessly together is fantastic to see and quite unique across a lot of organizations that I've seen previously.
Just to sort of piggyback one of the points that you made, you talked about obviously, inbound leads being low volume, and now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but over the year they've increased. Do you think there was any single key event or trigger that encouraged that, or what would you kind of put that down to?
Yeah, so I mean, we brought on some great people, which is one of the reasons that we've seen a massive uptick. What we've also done, and this is the team both on the demand generation side, the SEO side, the content side. Rather than working independently, there's a lot more collaboration in terms of what keywords are working for us on, say, AdWords, and how do we use those keywords within our SEO to make sure that our ads are performing better. On the content side, we did a huge review on the way that customers were asking for our services, whether they're asking for accounts or virtual IBANs, whether they're asking for FX or foreign exchange. And then we tweaked all of our landing pages to make sure that the messaging is speaks to the people that the inbound leads are coming in. And we've seen a significant increase through little bits of activity. And when I say significant, it's not overnight. It really is over time. And you can see how the quality of the leads is steadily going up. The feedback that we receive from the sales team helps us make decisions, and the marketing team to better optimize what we're doing across all activities. That's where we've seen the improvement.
And sort of, again, it's kind of like looking sort of retrospectively. Do you think there were any missed opportunities that you kind of look back now and you think, I should have done that, or a bit of regret that you didn't hit a certain channel or anything at all like that?
Some of the very large customers that we work with, for example, some of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world. We work with very large financial institutions, and generally speaking, our advertising channels aren't the type of channels that bring in these large customers. It's more either direct sales or referrals from other customers, or events where we've managed to build a strong relationship, etc. And I mentioned account-based marketing before. This is something that we've not heavily invested a lot of time in, but it's something that we know is going to form a large part of our strategy over the next 12 months. Really trying to understand who are the top 50 accounts in every single vertical that we're working with. How do we then do the market mapping in terms of which countries that we want to be working with? Who are the decision makers in terms of the roles within those businesses? Who are the influencers within those businesses? How can we increase the amount of touch points that we currently have with them? I mean, generally speaking, we're speaking, or someone in the business has already had some engagement with them, but how can we increase the frequency that we're touching base with them, again, so that we're front of mind when the time comes for them to be looking for a solution like ours? So I would say that looking back, I would have invested time and effort and resources into the account-based marketing program earlier than perhaps we're doing now. But yeah, it's all great learning, right?
Yeah. Well, equally, having said that, you could be sitting here, saying that, we invested hugely into the ABM stuff, but, my regret was that we didn't do enough content, right? So
yeah. There's so much you can do. There's so many different ways of reaching your target audience. For me and for OpenPayd and for our team, it's just a constant battle of prioritization, and that those prioritization decisions need to be based on, sometimes it's on your own kind of feeling. Other times it's when you've got the data to back it up and make those data-driven decisions, especially when you don't maybe have that historic data in the early stages. You've got to do as much as you can to test and learn and to iterate to make the better decisions in the longer term.
One thing that you mentioned was that a lot of large customers came in from referrals. To a degree, that it probably kind of falls in sales' lap to a degree at sort of B2B in a B2B organisation. But as a marketing team, as a marketing department, kind of what steps have you taken to influence that and encourage referrals and support the team with that?
We have a great customer success team here at OpenPayd who are basically, once a client has kind of converted or signed an agreement and they start as a customer with us, they are handed over to the customer success team who are in frequent contact with the customer, making sure that everything's working fine, making sure that they've got everything they need. If there's any opportunity to upsell our different services to them, that's their point of contact. And they're also the ones that will look for these referrals wherever there is opportunity for them, basically. Now, in terms of what we can do, and this is something, again, that's on the roadmap for this year, is really trying to understand the different connections between the businesses that we work for, because we might be a provider for a customer who could also be a partner for us as well. And it's trying to work out where there's synergies between the different companies. I think particularly within the fintech space, very rarely does a fintech do everything themselves. They've got multiple providers, whether that's KYC, whether that's payments, etc. And as an industry, it's very collaborative, I think. So this is where we see, for example, you might have an FX provider that we're providing accounts for, and they may get some of their FX from another provider who is also looking for accounts. So it's difficult. We don't want to push. We don't want to be too hard on our customers, because at the end of the day, we're there to provide the service. But when we see opportunity, we definitely try and look for potential synergies with other businesses that they may be working with or may know.
It echoes the advice that was given by a good friend of mine who's sales director at like a cloud technology company. And he always used to say to me, try and identify who the connectors are and who the individuals are within those organizations. Start speaking to them, because then they could end up introducing you to multiple opportunities. And sometimes it can be within a single organization if they're big enough. If it's like a traditional bank, there's departments within departments.
We see it as well, like, it's not something that we've done a lot of, but we will be doing more of in terms of like the customer testimonials, case studies, etc. I have a view on all leads that come into the system, and the amount of times that businesses quote other customers that we're working with, and they'll say, I see you're working with them. We have a similar product that we would love to discuss how you might be able to help us. Or I was speaking to X customer and they seemed really happy with your service. Would you be interested in having a chat to see how you could help us? So it really is the best type of introduction, or is the best type of lead is when there's kind of third-party validation that there's another business that is working with us and is happy with us. So yeah, the more of that, the better.
Michael, that was fantastic. I think we managed to cover an awful lot in such a short period of time. We've got a quick fire round, so I'll fire a few questions at you and see how we get on. What other podcasts are you listening to at the moment?
I listen to the Fintech Insider podcast on a regular basis. I find it very informative in terms of like the latest news and stuff that's happening within the fintech space. Stephen Bartlett, I listen to on occasion as well when the right guest comes along in terms of who kind of I'm interested in. But yeah, I think those are the kind of two that are off the top of my head.
And then are there any books that you would recommend to other marketers out there?
When I look at books, I like the more kind of psychology side of books, not specifically on marketing, but things that you can apply. There's one I'm reading at the minute called Peak, which is talking about people's... it talks about the human capabilities and how people historically saw that limits to people's capabilities. However, over time, it goes to show that there doesn't seem to be a limit, and we always keep improving, whether that's on the intelligence side of things, whether that's physical ability, etc. And it's quite an interesting one that can apply across a broad range of topics.
Cool. What fintech app are you using the most at the moment?
We've been all over the place with events at the minute. We were in Miami, we were in Paris, back in London, and I went on a short trip to Italy. So I've been using my Monzo card and making the most of the premium feature where you can withdraw your cash for free over there, and you can there's no kind of additional charges for payments. So that's the one that I've been using more recently. I also, with my girlfriend, we use Splitwise, which is quite a nice way to kind of divvy up the different payments that are happening within the household. So I'd say that those are the two ones that I frequently use.
Cool. And I suppose within the sort of fintech and startup spaces, who would you most like to go out to lunch with?
I would probably say the Klarna team, because they seem to be at all of the cool parties, all of the big London fashion events, etc. And they seem like a fun bunch. So I would definitely say them.
Cool. And kind of like last two, really. What's the best bit of life advice you've ever received?
However stressed or manic things get, then you need to take yourself out of the situation, looking at it from an outsider's point of view, and you realise that all of the kind of stress or the anxiety or the feeling that you're building up is all inside your head. And if you look at a situation from the outside in, you always have a different perspective on it.
It's cool. It's good advice. And so my last question, what's one thing I haven't asked that perhaps I should have?
One of the things that I like speaking about is embedded finance specifically, and what it means as a concept. It's something that everyone's talking about at the minute, but I think people don't realise that embedded finance has been around for many, many years in the form of like insurance with airlines or marketplaces and receiving funds, etc. That it's been around a very long time. I think the difference now is that with access to APIs and how advanced technology companies are becoming, it's really going to be available to absolutely everyone. And I think the concept of financial services and how we consume them is going to significantly change over the next probably 5 to 10 years. I think the concept of a bank will become very outdated, and you will have multiple banks with different services that you use or you consume. I think payments will become near invisible, and you really won't have to think about them as much anymore. So I think now that the phrase has been coined, embedded finance, or however you want to call it, I think we are going to see a significant change in the way that we deal with our finances over the very near future, and it's a very exciting place to be in, I think.
I'd massively agree with you. You can kind of see it always changing on what feels like a daily basis. Michael, that was fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on today. It was a really interesting conversation. And for those of you listening, don't forget to subscribe, share, like, do all the things you need to do. And we'll catch you next time.
The FML Podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk and make sure to search for the FML Podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.